All right. Welcome again. We are going to talk about naming our art and the process that or the framework that I use to come up with titles for my work. And to do that, I have some notes to share with you, and these notes will be available afterward. There'll be a PDF that you can download. Just leave in the comments that you want the notes, and myself or Ali, who's our client specialist here, she will get back to you with a link to do so. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to find my window. So I no longer do death by PowerPoint. We do death by Google Doc, and this is our coaching over coffee document that we use to share all the info. And like you can see that all of these different lessons are lessons I've delivered in the last few weeks, and I do my best to make sure that you guys are having a good experience here. So as long as if this is working for you, if you've watched a few coaching over coffees and this has been something that you found valuable, I'd love to hear. So if you think you'd rather have visuals and PowerPoints and slides, then let me know too. It, they are really time intensive to make, but they do look pretty when we do use them. Okay. So how to name your art. All right. What is in a name? Okay. Your title of your art should be an extension of the art. Okay. That means that you have your artwork and then your artwork expands based on how you name it. And if you don't believe me, then think about, let's say, a picture of a black and white picture of a waterfall, and you call it Fallen Dreams. Okay. That's going to make the viewer look at that artwork and say, okay, what is this artist trying to tell me? Falling Dreams, you know, how does he feel? And it's going to change the whole mood of the artwork. Or what if you called it What Lies Beyond? That's going to change again the whole experience of the art. If there's a falling waterfall and you say what lies beyond, the person is going to be thinking about what's behind the veil or what's beyond the crest of the river at the top, right? So the name expands the art and creates the experience or the roadmap for the experience. So we're going to go over that. Or I said it right here. We're going to go over the roadmap of the experience of the viewer. It also adds context to the image. And if you've heard me talk a lot, I always say that, well, let's make this bold and capitalized. Art equals creativity, right? Plus context. All right, this is my thing I say all the time. And creativity. And I 100% wholeheartedly believe that this is the case because without context, then you just have a decoration. The art is in your idea and your execution in delivering that idea as an experience for people. There's a lot of people who don't agree with me. I posted this thing on Twitter the other day. My @ on Twitter is @RealJasonMatias, by the way. And it's people were virulently against the idea that context has anything to do with art. And fine, let those people go along their way. They're not learning anything from me. And if you subscribe to my thoughts on the art business, then I feel like context is one of the most important things ever. Context is what creates your captions. Context is the story people tell. People don't, if you have a statement piece of art, if you have a custom piece of art and people walk into the collector's home, the collector doesn't go, oh, look at these blues and reds, right? That's not what they say. They say, this is a piece I got from an artist at this place. This is where I met him. This is what the story is about. This is why I love it. So the collector is delivering the context. And if you don't give them context for the art, then they have nothing to share. And probably they probably wouldn't have bought it, unless they're adding their own ideas, which is a whole different topic. We'll get into that later. Depth of interpretation. So the way you add the depth in which you tell your story and the gateway to that story is your title is how deeply connected to the art one of whoever's looking at your art is going to feel. So the title is super important, and it's also insight into the intent of the artist. And again, the intent of the artist is the context, so super important. To give you guys a little bit of context about my experience naming stuff, here are 3 different bodies of work that I have titles for, right? And we'll look at a few of these. And I'm not going to include any links to them in this document because When you guys are part of TASA and we go over the Facebook marketing and ads, um, we do a lot of retargeting, and if you guys don't need to see my ads basically. So, but we will share some of these guys. Like, let me know which one of these you want to see. I have a collection called Quietude, right? This is a collection title. So this sets the whole feeling, the whole mood for the entire body of work. And these are the titles that go with it. A quiet suggestion of the world in motion, a cloak of quiet anticipation, a quiet place to ruminate, a quiet contemplation of the world at large. Like, think about the mood that just these titles set for this body of work. A whisper of quiet revelation. And think about the cohesiveness that fits under this whole idea of quietude just based on these titles. A quiet reverie of piercing moments. Like, what is this piece going to be about? Right? Then I have a collection called Aria. And the first piece in the collection is named Aria. Left Alone, Claire de Lune, Midnight Dove, Fell on Black Days. Like, each of these titles, this isn't woman posing on a stand. This isn't a bird in the night, right? This is Midnight Dove, Porcelain Heart, right? And we'll talk about, like, these are suggestive titles. The titles in the quietude section are narrative titles. And a majority of the way I name my work is very narrative. So my why, and we'll talk about why statements a little bit here, even though there's going to be a whole nother training on why statements, is this idea of comfortable isolation. This is the aesthetic of my work. And these titles, how do these titles lead in or lean into this idea of who I am and what I create? Solitude, adrift, room for one in their dreams, crescendo and gale, peace, passion, tranquility, a memory of light. This is the piece I just shared on my Facebook page today. Taken away, wandering star, higher self. Like, all of these ideas are, all of these titles create the way people are going to experience the art. So again, like, this is a passion project of mine, or a passion topic of mine, and I find that I get a little bit carried away about it. So let's talk about it. Now, I call this a narrative, and this is suggestive, right? So I did a little research for you, and here are 10 types of titles. Right? So 10 types of titles. Now, I made the text small, and we're not going to go over all of these because we'll be here just for the next 30 minutes just talking about these. But really quickly, we have descriptive titles, which are, tells people exactly what you're looking at. And I feel that these are kind of limiting when it comes to storytelling. It depends on you as an artist, whether you're going to use something like this. But Portrait of a Young Woman, Sunset Over the Ocean, these are descriptive titles. They directly tell people what you're looking at. Suggestive titles, Whispers of Autumn, for a painting that uses fall colors, right? Abstract titles. This is what I find that most artists are using, especially artists who are less articulate with the way they can describe their work. And this is what I would like some of you, when relevant, to stray away from. Because you'll take a piece and you'll call it resonance, or like this ephemera, or what else? I've seen people like endangered, or just these single word titles that don't create a gateway. I keep using this word gateway because it's part of the tips, but that don't create a context for the people who are looking at your work. So if you have a piece of art and you call it darkness, right? What does that mean? Like, what kind of feeling is someone supposed to feel when they see it? Like, that's calling it a black and white, that piece that's mostly dark, calling it darkness is pretty much near a descriptive title, but it doesn't really tell us anything about the art. So this is what I see most artists do, and what I saw most in the group is the artists don't have an idea of how to articulate their why into the title and the description of the work, and they don't. So you just default to some one word answer. Okay, so this is not so much a criticism. I just think it's a place from which you can grow. Okay, narrative titles. Narrative titles suggest a story or a specific context. Right, this is where I lean most in my titles. And I also lean on symbolic and metaphorical titles, right? So like The Cage of Freedom or The Last Goodbye. These two are really close together in terms of their definitions. So this is where I live, and this is where I try to teach you to live, in the articulation of the ideas and the context about your art. And then there's inquisitive titles, which I think are really great, and I've never used one. but I think it's a really cool way to start a conversation about the work. What lies beyond? Um, what's behind the veil? Where do we go from here? Right? Like those type of inquisitive titles could lead to a conversation about your work, and depending on who your customer is, right? We're creating our titles for our to articulate our why, for why we create and why we made this piece in specifically, but also for our customers, which is, I know that some of you are going to feel like, why I want to create for me, not for my customer, but at the same, you're doing both at the same time, because your customer is someone who's going to attach themselves to your ideas, your why, and your visual. So you're creating for the two of you at the same time. Humorous and playful titles. I'm not, I mean, I laugh a little bit, but I'm not really like the most humorous type of person, especially when it comes to art. So I don't really use these. But again, if you can, then it's a way to connect with your audience, depending on the type of work you do. But the untitled one, right? This is a hot topic for a lot of artists. Sometimes they just want to label their piece untitled 1, 2, 3. And I think that's okay, as long as you are leaning into collection titles or body of work titles, right? This is what a few weeks ago we talked about artist statements. So like your artist statement would describe the entire body of work. And then if it does so well, and if the artist statement and the title of the body of work can create the context from which the person who is viewing the work can experience it and travel through the art, then that's fine. All right. So you can go with untitled. Okay. I suggest going through, we're going to talk about brainstorming in a little bit. And I suggest going through the brainstorming process and seeing if you can articulate your ideas before deciding that untitled is the proper way to go. And it might be that you have such a huge body of work under this one title, under this one collection, that naming each one doesn't make sense. It just depends. But use it wisely. Right. Does anyone have any questions about these 10 or about these ideas that I have shared so far? Ali? No? We're good to go? Okay. So speeding through it then. All right. Tip number 1, the title should add something new to the art. So just like if you were composing a piece of art and you were decided whether you were going to paint a tree here or put a person in the shadows or put a little cat sticking on it, like you're deciding those elements that are inside the visual, the title should also add value to the art's experience, right? So consider the title not only a part of the art, but an aspect of it, a expansion of what it is that the person is experiencing. So the title should enrich or clarify the experience of the art. So again, if we go back to the waterfall example, which I just thought of, if you had the waterfall and your title was Falling Dreams or Falling in Love, right? That expands or it clarifies the experience that you want your viewer to have, right? And the flip side of that, like what's behind the veil, what's behind the water, where do we go from here? That type of idea is also adding something and adding some context to the work, right? Tip number 2, you should connect your feelings to the artwork or the feeling you intend the audience to feel, okay? One or the other. Normally, for me, I always connect my feelings to the artwork, but if your art is less introspective of you, the creator, and more about the audience, then you would connect the feelings to them. But that means you have to get in touch with your feelings, right? That means you have to actually know what it is you are trying to express with your work, which means knowing your why. Right. When I talked about a few weeks ago, the artist statement, we did a 30-40 minute training on artist statements. I said that there are 4 artist statements that you need to have. Okay. The first one is the artist statement, which is the one we trained on, which is the academic explanation of a specific body of work. And then you have your artist bio, which is your academic bio, who you are, where you came from, when you were born, what's your education, what's your CV, right? Just the details that someone needs to know to get the shape of your life in general. And then you have your story bio, which is the fun one that you get to share with people. And I think that might be our next training. let me know. I think that's a fun one to, and we just talked about this with another artist. So story bio, if you guys want to learn that next, then let's talk about it. But story bio, that's the fun one. That's the one that should be on your website, not your academic bio, not your artist statement. It should be your story bio that allows people to get to know who you are. And then last is the most important one is the why statement. Why do you create art? And when you have this why statement will give you the shape of your communication for the foreseeable future. You can take your why statement and you can insert variations of it into every piece of art you make so that whenever someone looks at it and understands it, then they can understand your art. Okay. So knowing your why is the key to figuring out the title, right? Your why is the caption, your title is the gateway. So know your why. So tip number two was you should connect your feelings to the art, which means you have to know your feelings. Tip number three, make the title as expansive as possible, right? This is why I lean away from descriptive titles because they're very narrow. They take the whole gamut of what someone could be thinking and narrow it, right? So if we go back to the waterfall example, if you just called it waterfall, right? Or you just called it Franklin Falls, which is the one near me. Snoqualmie Falls. It just takes the whole experience and turns it into a very one-dimensional viewing of the work. And I think that we should do the opposite. We should make our titles expansive. We should give people a gateway, like a big archway with the title of your art and your art on the other side, and then allow people to walk through it and then meander into their own experience. So they'll have the gateway, and then they'll have your story, which will be the roadmap, and then they'll have the opportunity to make all of that mean something to themselves, right? But if you just call it waterfall, then that's all they're going to see is a waterfall, and that's it. Okay, so you have to rely on this person to really love waterfalls and have a place for their art and have their own story to attribute to the painting that you made, and that's a lot of ifs for getting a sale. Okay, so tip number three, make it as expansive as possible. You want to give the audience the opportunity to expand into the art using the title as a starting point, like a gateway, like the beginning of a roadmap. I hope that makes sense. So tips 1, 2, and 3. All right. If from here, what do you do? Right. Let's make this actionable. How do you create something out of nothing? How do you create a title out of the idea and the visual that you had? All right. We're going to do this by brainstorming. I'm going to take a drink. Christopher says, I just created a painting an hour ago, and I am starting to think up a thesis for the piece that resembles what I see in my brain. Yeah, Chris, that's freaking awesome. Please, after this call is done, and once you come up with a title, or once you've come up with a few title ideas, then share that with the group. I don't mind you guys sharing your art in the group. Sometimes I remove it because it's self-promotion, but if you're sharing your work and you are being productive part of the community, then I'm totally down to check out what you guys are doing. All right. Um, it's all in the scribbles. And okay. So let me go back to my doc here. There it is. Right. So brainstorming. So brainstorming should happen in your personal safe space, right? What I mean by that is give yourself permission to be stupid. Your brainstorming worksheet that I'm about to show you, it's not really a worksheet, but an example, is something that you wouldn't normally share with people. It's it just happens in this sort of blank whiteboard that nobody's ever going to see. And if you have a stupid idea, there's no one there to call it stupid except for you. So if you have to give it that label, then allow yourself to still write it down, right? There is, I wrote it here somewhere. There's accept every idea that comes to your mind, right? So let yourself be meandering, let your mind wander, but record every piece of the wandering, right? You want to reflect on the essence of the art. So like Christopher was saying, what was the intention when you were creating the art? And maybe if you had some sort of original sketch or original idea behind before you started creating, then let that be a part of the process. Brainstorming, you should also brainstorm the story of the piece. All right. So the essence is the feeling you want to convey. The story is the narrative behind the art that you're making. And then again, consider your why. So if you were going through the TASA program, then the why statement is one of the first modules that you have to do as part of the 90-day program. And once you have that done, it stays with you. Like I'm always going to ask you about it. I'm always going to say, how does this fit into what it is you want to create? And why are you making this piece of art? Basically, there's two major fundamental creative processes that are included in TASA. One is the why statement, one is finding your voice, or the other is finding your voice. And if those two aren't aligned, why are you creating that? You know? So consider that when you're doing your brainstorming. Experiment and get feedback. Like Ali, my partner, is watching this right now and checking out the comments and whatnot. She gets to hear all of my ideas. Okay, so I'll come up with a piece of art and then I'll come up with a bunch of titles. And if I really can't decide or if I really can't think of them, um, I'll I'll ask her, so what do you think of this title? And sometimes me asking isn't really, it's just me voicing it out loud. And I'll go back to the drawing board with the new idea I had just by looking at her response on her face. But who's your tribe? Who are your people that you can share your ideas with? Uh, make that a make them a part of your sort of inner circle. And you can use this group, or if you're a member, you can use the members group and post your art and say, these are my 4 titles and this is why, and help me find out why. Help me figure out which one, right? So tips for brainstorming: set a clear objective or intent. You can write this intent at the top of your brainstorming list. And I have 2 brainstorming sheets that I'm going to share with you, or 2 brainstorming examples that I'm going to share. And so set a clear intent and then accept everything that comes after it. Right. So you're going to accept every idea and you're going to commit them to some document. Okay. Set a time limit. Right. It doesn't help you to not set a limit for how long it's going to take you to finish this piece, or at least finish the brainstorming session. So I'm going to have a half-hour brainstorming session and then I'm going to walk away. I'm going to have an hour brainstorming session and I'm going to walk away. Right. Never erase anything on your brainstorming document, right? It actually becomes a little piece of art. Like here, I'll show you one because we're running out of time. Um, it actually becomes like a little piece of art, uh, and you just keep it. You'd be surprised. I haven't done this personally, but I've seen people sell their original sketch, their original idea for the art along with the art, and that's and sell it for a pretty penny too. So, but that's not the point of keeping it. My point is that do not erase anything in your brainstorming process, because you never know which piece of these becomes part of the end product. And erasing it goes back to you not giving yourself permission to be dumb, to be stupid, right? Go with the flow. Let your brain wander, let your mind, this goes back to accepting everything. Just follow your thought path, all right? And then be visual with it, draw pictures, share whatever comes to your mind, right? So I have a collection that I still have yet to release of skulls, right? And I have this skull thing, I won't pull it out. But one of the things that held me back before I was going to release it before is I couldn't figure out a title. And I went through this whole brainstorming process. And you can see I have these little doodles. I wrote things like, I started broad, like what is this? They're pictures of skulls, they're photographs of skulls. So skulls, bones, pile of skulls, uh, green, Iceland, grins, traveling death, fire and green fire. It just these ideas that as they were coming out. What do skulls represent? Loss, flashing across her face, vanishing as soon as it comes. Um, there's a lot. Cinco de Mayo. Like what are the broad topics related to your topic or your subject in the art, and then it keeps going. It keeps the whole thing keeps going. It's got to load, but the ideas keep coming, and then I wrote down Jim Carrey. Oh, The Mask. I don't know how that came from this picture, but eventually I came to the title, and I was scrolling down, but you can see that my actual title came out somewhere midway in the whole process. And then I kept going. This is why you don't erase anything. And I went back and highlighted it because I thought this was a good one. And then I kept going for until I was out of ideas or my brainstorming session was done. And once I was able to review my whole mess of scribbles here, we came back to Eyes of Mori, which is the collection of skulls that I have to release at some point. Right? We did something really similar in this one. So I have an art release on Super Rare, and this was a collaborative brainstorming session, and it's long, right? Me and this guy, Rob Woodcocks, I don't know if you guys know who that is, but we were going back and forth trying to find the place where our two ideas meet. And in this process, I came up with some really cool ideas for other bodies of work, some other titles that I could use in the future. But it came out that the collection ended up being Forms of Reflection. But look how much more we kept going before we decided on a name that fit both of our bodies of work. And then because I didn't erase everything, I have another collection title that I could use one day called Never Ending Stories. Reflect out of the reflection pool. Like there's some cool ideas here that's I think fit the rest of my work if I could find a place to make them all match. So again, tips for brainstorming, set clear objections, and the really important one I think here is erase nothing, right? All of your ideas are valid, right? Let me take a quick peek at the comments again, and we'll dig into some of your guys' ideas. What do you think? Was this valuable? If this was valuable, put a yes in the comments. I just created a painting on 2 hours ago. Jessica says yes. Lori says this makes sense. How many of you guys think you needed a framework? I saw that there's a bunch of people who asked for the replay because they couldn't be here today. And I saw that, someone was like, hey, my titles really suck. Like, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean that my titles suck? I don't know. So Ryan can come back and give us his answer to that later. But if I had to guess, I would say that he doesn't feel his titles are expressing his ideas. And I think that especially when it comes to documentative art, photography, that we get caught in the real thing that we were photographing and not in the intent for why we were taking the photograph. And a lot of artists, especially landscape photographers, fall into this trap of, this is Mount Shuksan, right? Boom, here's a picture of Mount Shuksan, right? And we get caught doing this documentation process and trying to coordinate it with art, or to correlate it with art. And instead of doing an art process and correlating it with photography. So go back to the why again, and create within the context of your heart, basically. This is his first coffee chat. I've been sipping on my own. Yeah, so I used to do these at 11 a.m., but I have a mastermind meeting that I go to with my own coaches, and that's at 11 a.m. So I just realized that I missed it today. So instead of doing the coffee, we do cold brews here. I'm doing one of my energy drinks. So yeah, sipping on my own cup of Joe. All right. Kelly says my art is abstract, so I like the idea of creating a title intent before I make the piece to help create the story. Yeah, Kelly, I think that if you are so if your art is abstract, then your why becomes becomes the story within which you create, right? So really think about, why do you create? And going back to that topic, we'll do a whole nother training on that if you guys want. Um, your why should be unique to you. Okay. And what I mean by that is that your why statement should be like a core memory, like a core statement about your art. So if you're thinking about, why do you create, and you come up with, I just love being outside and painting plein air. Like, being outside in nature makes me feel good, right? Or makes me happy, or makes me feel connected to something, right? Well, if someone else can say that same thing, then it's not unique enough, right? It doesn't reveal who you are in this statement. So keep digging, and keep coming up with something that's really, really close to your heart. Hmm. All right, cool. Getting pretty good at keeping these to 30 minutes. So let me do this. I'll hang out for another 30, 40 seconds and see if anything else comes in or comes through. And then